I'm Maria, and I've got some favorite cards from M21 that won't surprise you, and one that will.
I'm Riley, and I really want to find out why aggro decks cannot beat Wilderness Reclamation.
I'm Cedric. I have a deck that has 21 forests that can beat Wilderness Reclamation.
And I'm Corbin, and I'm going to tell you about the Core Set 2021 card that has more modes than Cryptic Command.
All that and more coming up on the Advantage Bar. Hey everybody, welcome to the Advantage Bar, your show for the shape of Standard every single week. I'm one of your hosts, Maria Bartholdi, and with me, as always, as a co-host, Riley Knight. Riley, what's up?
What's up, Maria? Great to be here. A lot to get across. We've got the weekend's results from the PT. We've got M21 on the horizon, so plenty of meat on the bones for the show this week.
Yeah, we've got Cedric Phillips as well in our expert chair. Cedric, are you ready to talk some Temur?
I am so ready, Maria, to talk some Temur that I actually brought out my old man pair of glasses because, folks, this is serious business. Yeah.
We've also got Corbin Hostler along as an expert. And Corbin, yeah, I do think Standard's going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah, that's right. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. We will talk about, I don't know if those boats are going to be quite big enough, but we will talk about some of the decks that had a good weekend against Temur Rec.
All right, I'm excited to hear that. But before we do any of that, we've got to do a check-in of this week's news. Okay, checking in on the news from this past week. Some big news. We had not one, but 2 Players Tour online championships. And Riley, I mean, we can't bury the lead here. Temur was everywhere.
Yeah, it really was. An overall metagame percentage of around 35% across the 2 events, 40 in the first one, 30 in the second one. There's no doubt in anyone's mind what is the deck to beat at the moment. Can you beat it? How do you beat it? We're going to get across all of this, of course, in today's episode, but a very strong presence from Temur Reclamation, not only in these tournaments, Maria, but also in the respective top 8s.
Yeah, let's take a look at the top 8 from the first tournament. 6 copies of the 8 were Temur Reclamation. The other 2 were banned to ramp. And you can see some big names in this top 8 too. Simon Gertzen and his brother, Dominic Gertzen, made this top 8, which is really cool. Louis Deltour, who had been pacing the field for a lot of the tournament, also in our top 8. But our winner, Elias Watsfeld, your former draft master, proving he's pretty good at constructed as well.
40 cards, 60 cards, doesn't matter. Elias is going to get it done, and he did indeed get it done with Temur Reclamation. But interesting to note, the dominance of Breeding Pool and Growth Spiral. AGLVI pointed out on Twitter, this is the first PT top 8 that had 32 copies of a card. This has never happened before, so really green-blue base decks at a point of unseen dominance. It's really a sight to behold.
Yeah, Temur Reclamation dominating in our second top 8 as well. Let's take a look here at this top 8. Not quite as dominant. 4 of our copies in this top 8 were Temur Reclamation, joined by a couple different versions of Jund Sacrifice and Sultai Ramp, along with a Rakdos Sacrifice piloted by Mythic Champion Eli Loveman as well. But the winner who came out on top was once again playing Temur Reclamation, Ryuji Murray. Once again, congratulations to him. Big champion here for Players Tour Online number 2. And Riley, we're going to do it all this weekend as well. We've got 2 more Players Tour championships to hand out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, once again, you can see the depth of talent. The people really turned out. Some of the biggest names in Standard turning out to get it done in these tournaments. You know, the Danish juggernaut, Christopher Larsen, up in there as well. As you say, Jean-Emmanuel Duprat, a name that will be known to many. Ali Warfield as well, a recent addition to the Rivals League. So plenty of people who I know, had supporters around the world barracking hard for them. And I don't expect to be any different to this weekend with some of the slow coaches finally catching up and getting it done on the PT.
But we are not done, like I said, with these Players Tour events. We've got 2 more coming up this weekend, and you're not going to want to miss any of the action over on twitch.tv/magic. But right now, let's take a deeper dive into the metagame. Taking a closer look at the combined metagame from our 2 Players Tour events, Temur Reclamation, it had a field day with the competition. If you say, Temur Rec, it wrecked face. Cedric, you were playing in this tournament. How did you do? And did you see Temur Rec everywhere?
Honestly, I didn't play against it as much as I thought I would, and I played against it 6 times. which that's a lot, and I was expecting more, especially based off of the Players Tour Online 1 metagame breakdown. I played in Players Tour Online 2 and finished, I think I got 27th, I think exactly, which a solid finish. I'm really happy about that, but I would have actually liked to play against Temur Reclamation more because that was the deck I was gunning for by playing Mono Green Aggro. I know we're going to talk about that in a later segment, but yeah, I mean, you said it. This tournament, both of these tournaments, and this entire weekend was saturated by this deck, which is far and away the best deck in the format right now.
Yeah, Corbin, talk a little bit about this deck's dominance here. Taking a look at this breakdown, Temur Reclamation far and away the most played deck, and with the best win rate of the field as well at almost 57%. Jund Sacrifice coming in second, followed by Sultai Ramp, Bant Ramp, and there's our first aggressive deck in Mono Red Aggro all the way down there.
Yeah, you said it. The win rate is a really interesting thing there because coming into this tournament, everyone knew Temur Rec was a great deck. It had a target on its back. People knew that's what they were aiming at. And still, in both events, it gained meta share from day 1 to day 2. And then, as we saw, dominated the tournaments as well as the trophies. So it was huge. And you go a little further down and you see some decks that can combat each other. But at the end of the day, there's no way around the fact that Temur Rec is the best deck in Standard, and more than that, it's a best deck that's held up to the scrutiny, and you don't always see decks that come into a tournament hyped up really high hold up to that level of pressure, but Temur Rec did.
And Riley, you were in the caster seat for the first Players Tour. Tell me, what was your experience like?
Well, we definitely had a lot of Temur Rec, which is, what people expected, that sort of thing. We did, the best to showcase as many different decks and as many different strategies and archetypes as possible. But towards the end of the day, like towards the end of the tournament, especially in day number 2, Temur Rec was just all over the place. And that's reflected in the win rates, right? And what is just absolutely staggering for me, and we're going to get into this later on, is the win rates of aggressive decks. Because, I've spoken to many people, I think we've talked about on the show, the fact that Temur Rec is just cold to aggro, and that is not the reality. We can sit here and theorycraft all day long about it, but at the end of the day, you're looking at decks like Mardu Knights, looking at decks like Mono Red Aggro, these Embercleave decks that have a very clear, just abysmal win rate against the field, most of which is occupied by Temur Rec. So I don't think this is a matter of losing to Mayhem Devil. I don't think this is a matter of losing to Shadow the Sky. This is just actually a bad matchup against Temur Reclamation, and that has huge consequences for the overall metagame moving forward. The other thing I want to point out as well when it comes to win rates is the atrocious win rate of Azorius Control. This deck clocked in with a 37% win rate against the field, which is... It's like that's just unplayable. That's just not a deck that if that's the win rate of a deck, you just should not be playing that deck. So it's very clear that Azorius Control players need to go back to the drawing board and heavily retool their answer suite and really rethink what they're trying to achieve, because that's just an unsustainable way. Go ahead.
Don't tell people not to play it. Tell them to play it. I like beating up on that
go
deck.
ahead.
Are you kidding me?
What? You know what I think you should be cutting? You should be cutting Shadow the Sky. That card is just, it's so bad. And when I'm sitting down with my Mardu Knights and my Embercleave, all I'm hoping is that you've just got a handful of Shadow the Sky. So that's the pro tip. From me to you, that's the pro tip. Cut Shadow the Sky, you're going to win more games.
On that note, one of the interesting things is that Sultai Ramp actually came into the second Players Tour event with a much higher meta share than the first one. It was actually the second most popular deck at Players Tour Online 2. And talking about underperformers, it did not do well at all. Down there at 44% at a win rate on the Sultai Ramp for a deck that a lot of players came into the tournament thinking that was the answer. You have access to Casualties of War in addition to all these other powerful cards. It really did not get there. So it seemed like with its big meta share at Players Tour Online 2 that people were looking at that as maybe the answer to Temur Rec, and it did not hold up. So, expect to see that just fall completely off the radar after last weekend.
Yeah, I remember watching that deck, and it looked like people had hopes. I could tell Reed Duke was super interested in it, and then that hope slowly died as the weekend wore on. But yeah, let's talk about the most popular deck. Like, we can't ignore it. Temur Reclamation, dominant. But the thing is, there didn't appear to be a consensus on the 100% correct build of Temur Reclamation going into the event. Even in our top 8, there are big disparities on how people are building this deck. Cedric, I'm looking to you. Like Ambusher is one of the cards that I saw in some people's decks, in some people's mains, and some people just left it out.
Yeah, so this is a really, really interesting conversation. I think the four of us can agree that Temur Reclamation is the best deck, and anybody who's playing competitive standard Magic right now, anywhere, Magic Arena, Magic Online, whatever, it's the consensus. The numbers kind of backed it up, at least for the last weekend for Players Tour Online 1 and 2. What it looks like for Players Tour Online 3 and 4, we'll see. But my expectation is that a lot of people are going to play this deck. But the interesting thing, as you mentioned, Maria, is that we don't know what the consensus best build is. If you think of the previous standard format, using the term previous loosely, because we had to get rid of a couple of cards and change the companion mechanic, we all knew what the best deck was in Yori and Jeskai Luka, and maybe it was different by like 3 or 4 cards. Jean-Emmanuel Duprat didn't play Shark Typhoon in his main deck. He had them in his sideboard. Everyone else had him in his main deck, and he got second place in Players Tour Online 2. We have some people that have main deck counterspells and Scorching Dragonfire, some people that don't. We've got main deck copies of Opt. Some people don't play any, some people play 4. Thassa's Intervention varies between 1 to 3. The only thing that people have really settled on is the following. Expansion, Explosion, Wilderness Reclamation are 4-ofs. If you're not doing that, you've lost your mind. Similarly with Growth Spiral, if you're not doing that, I don't even know if you can be a part of this conversation. That card's busted. And then you've got Breeding Pool, you've got Fabled Passage. Those are kind of the cards that were for sure are 4-ofs and are going to be in the deck. But then the other numbers are kind of tangible. You know, do you want to play 3 Earls? Probably, and that's what most people settled on. Do you want to play Brazen Borrow in your main deck? Probably, and I think more people are going to play it this coming weekend than they did in the previous weekend, because the kind of the consensus has been is that card has performed. It overperformed for people who played it, and people wish they had it. But the thing about this deck, Maria, obviously the power level is incredibly high. We all know how good Wilderness Reclamation is too, but the consensus build of this deck is really, really up in the air, and that doesn't even get into the sideboarding, which we'll get into here in just a bit.
Yeah, Corbin, I mean, thinking about the sideboard for you, what stands out as to looking forward? What are we supposed to do if we expect, are we even going to be running Flame Sweep? Like, are we expecting everybody to play Temur Reclamation so it's just out of here? Or do we need to have it for insurance?
Yeah. I mean, look, what I want to do is kind of put this in perspective. We're going to talk really in the weeds here about sideboard cards and about main deck choices, but this is what sets the cream of the crop from everyone else. This is the best players in the world are the players who are going to take this Temur Rec deck and come into a tournament understanding that a lot of people are playing the same deck, and they all may have 65 of the same 75 cards in their list. But those last 10 and where they're at really, really matter. You know, we saw the Night Pack Ambushers, a big one. Abe Corrigan top 8'd with 4 Night Pack Ambushers in his main deck, as well as 2 Wolf Willow Havens, because he just wanted more copies of Growth Spiral, more ramp. So moving forward, you're going to see these players in the Temur Rec mirror try to figure out how to go over the top of each other and how to win. And some people think it's Shark Typhoon. Some people think it's Brazen Borrower. Some people think it's Night Pack Ambusher. And moving forward, you're going to see people trying all of those things. And you're going to see people trying a lot of counter magic as well. You saw a lot of counter spells in that finals. It really reminded me of the finals of, it was PT Kaladesh in 2016. Shota Yasuoka just won an epic counterspell war in the final game of the finals to beat Carlos Ramal for the title. And that's how I felt watching these Temur Rec decks battle it out in the finals. Is a lot of counter magic, trying to set up for that one big turn when you swing the game. So moving forward, you're going to see a lot of the Temur Rec players doing that to each other, and that might open the door up for some of these other decks we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I want to specifically talk about these counter battles and exactly how complicated it is to play Temur Reclamation. You know, you sit down, you say, well, I'm going to play the best deck, all right? So I'm going to win now. But the thing about this deck, I think I saw through coverage, and maybe you can talk about this too, Riley, is that you've got to be really, really good at playing this Temur Reclamation deck. You have to be able to kind of be a mind reader and figure out exactly what your opponent is doing, particularly in the mirror match at any given moment, and what their play says about what they do or don't have in their hand, even more so than you do in a normal game of Magic. Is this something you saw when you were doing coverage?
I think this is one of the most skill testing decks I've ever seen in Standard. This is one of the decks that will separate the wheat from the chaff, not when it comes to, you know, how good you are at even... I mean, we talked about deck building. Sure, deck building is an important part of it, and people who are good at deck building, picking apart holes in the metagame, whatever else, are going to succeed. But when it comes to actual gameplay, you can give the same 75 to 2 players of completely disparate skill levels, and that will be reflected so accurately in their respective performances, win rates, whatever else. This is a decision intense, Very, very, as I say, very skill testing deck that at every point rewards good play and punishes mistakes. So much of what you're doing is at instant speed. Everything you're doing is highly interactive with counterspells and whatever else. And there's, this almost combo-like finish of expansion explosion to close out games is complemented with the fact that now with Shark Typhoon, you can also contest the board. So knowing in which direction to go, knowing which cards to play around, knowing how to navigate the choppy waters you're sailing through has meant that we have seen, while talking about this, we talk about the cream rising to the top, but it's not just the best builds of this deck, it's also the best players. I'm sure there are others that are close to this in sort of where they stand in their respective standard formats, but I can't remember a deck off the top of my head that was as skill testing as this one, at least in a standard format. It really is something.
Great point, Riley. And I think not only, are the game ones with this deck so hard to navigate, but post-sideboard could potentially be even trickier. Cedric, has this been your experience from what you've seen?
Well, from what I've seen, absolutely, and I think we also got to see that as these players worked themselves through the top 8 of both of these Players Tour Online events, because there was so much of the deck that we were just going to have, eventually, them run into each other, because that's all that could really happen, given the win percentages of the decks. But what's really interesting is how players are approaching the sideboarding. Everyone's main deck and sideboard as far as cards that they're playing in their 75 cards is a little bit different. We went over that already. But the way that they're approaching the sideboard, let's take some guy, I don't know, I'm not sure if you heard of him, Luis Scott Vargas. Some guy, as it were. Wilderness Reclamation and Expansion Explosions are cards that he's sideboarding out to turn into a pure control deck with counterspells and Nightpack Ambusher, which those are two of the 4-ofs that when you build this deck, you start with those 2 cards as 4-ofs, and now he's sideboarding them out. He talked about the fact that he was doing that. Some players are, are they leaving Ether Gust in, or are they boarding it out? It makes sense to leave it in because it takes care of Wilderness Reclamation, or at least delays it a little bit, and Nightpack Ambusher, but all it does is delay, not fully counter. So we're seeing this kind of games of chicken in these games, like on turn 3, if I can play Wilderness Reclamation, am I supposed to do that? Because if it gets countered and then my opponent plays a land in Wilderness Reclamation, I might just lose on the spot right there. So now you're playing these games of should I, shouldn't I, and all of this stuff that Riley talked about where it equates to the best players figuring out the best lines to take, but even the best ones, like Jean-Emmanuel Duprat, who had the opportunity for a win, to win the tournament, didn't do it. That's how hard it is, Maria.
Yeah, let's take a look at this moment because, Cedric, what a heartbreaker. Jean-Emmanuel Duprat had the win, but he didn't take it. And he was actually watching this game, by the way, back with us in chat, and he had to see it happen for himself and learn that he had the win and he didn't go for it. Anyway, let's take a look at what happened.
If he goes for it, he will win. Oh, man. He is going upstairs. X equals 4, Reed. He's going to return the favor.
Brutal. Sometimes, yeah, I feel like he's playing correctly here. He's being conservative. You can't possibly know everything that's going on in your opponent's hand. But just a little bit heartbreaking for Jean-Emmanuel Duprat to see that. But just as exciting was actually the final turn of the game when Ryuji Murray actually got the win and Jean-Emmanuel Duprat is digging desperately for answers. And he almost finds one, but it's not exactly the one he was looking for.
Here we go. Shark Typhoon cycle. Try to hit something. X equals 0. It's Mystical Dispute. Oh, not the one that Jean-Emmanuel needed. All Murray has to do is pay for it, and he will be your champion. There it goes. Players Tour Online goes to Ryuji Murray in an incredible Game 3 decider between him and Jean-Emmanuel Duprat.
Sometimes your counter spell is a Mystical Dispute late in the game, and you just have to say, well, that's how it is.
It's not perfect always. Yeah. It's really good, but it's not always perfect.
Yeah, why aren't you a negate? Why aren't you a negate? But I guess what this leads me to ask is we've got 2 more Players Tours coming up this next weekend. What on earth do you do? Do you play Temur Reclamation and make your sideboard something that's excellent in the mirror? Do you have a transformational sideboard, a little bit like what Cedric was talking about in a way? Or do you go a completely separate direction? That's what you tried to do, Cedric. You played mono green monsters. You went 10-5. Do you think that's a strategy that's good enough?
I very much do. You know, there's obviously the question of beat them or join them, and I'm sure, well, I don't know what side Riley and Corbin stand on with that, or you, Maria, but for me, I'm very much a beat them kind of person, unless the deck is so overwhelmingly good, like Yuri and Jeskai Luka was in the previous standard format, that you really don't have a choice. But for me, I feel like I found a little bit of a hole, and ultimately, what we're going to see, I think, at Players Tour Online 3 and 4, is people are going to over metagame now to beat this deck, given how well it did. So you guys do all that. You guys with your negates main deck. Ha! Ha! Are you kidding me? That's a dream come true. Yeah, that's a dream come true. You worry about that. I've got 33 creatures. Best of luck to you.
Well, let's take a look actually at the rest of the field, because we've been talking about Temur a lot, but there are a lot of other decks that people brought to the table. We're going to dig around and see if we can find anything that might have a real fighting chance against Temur Reclamation coming up this weekend.
Well, even if Temur Rec is the talk of the town, of course, and even if it did have a very sizable metagame share, it wasn't the only deck that people turned up with, and it's time for us to, Maria, talk about some of the other decks that did well. We can turn our attention once again to the metagame breakdown and some of the decks that perform strongly when it comes to win rates and the metagame share, that sort of stuff. And three of them jump out to me here in looking at Bant Ramp, which has been around for a long time, Mono Green Stompy, and Rakdos Sacrifice / Jund Sacrifice. Particularly the Ramp deck and the Sacrifice deck, Maria. We've seen Bant Ramp with and without companions now, and we've seen various Mayhem Devil decks for a long time. So I guess it's unsurprising to see these decks still doing well, even if they are living in the shadow of Temur Rec.
Yeah, specifically with the Jund Sacrifice deck or the Rakdos Sacrifice deck, which, really didn't lose anything of note when it comes to like the companion rules change or the bans or anything like that. And that was another deck that people were talking about a lot as, just like Temur Reclamation didn't lose anything. Here we are, it's still extremely powerful. And just like Temur Reclamation, or a Wilderness Reclamation deck, I should say, has been a powerful, powerful strategy in Standard for a long time. And here we can still see it maintaining its dominance. Now, the Mono Green Stompy deck, that's kind of a little bit like the new kid on the block, despite the fact that it's a pretty straightforward deck, and it's been a deck you can play in Magic for a long time. It kind of hasn't been a player on the stage. And what I'm wondering is what we can do with that deck. Maybe there's a tool in there to push it just over the top. I feel like it just needs that little push, and it'll just head down the hill on its tricycle, So that's what I'm looking for coming up this weekend, because, I want to see the king dethroned. Let's get Temur Rec out of here. Let's get Jund Sacrifice out of here and find something that can take them down. That's what I'm looking for. Does it exist? Probably not, but I'm hopeful.
I love that optimism anyway. I want to talk about the role of aggressive decks, because obviously the Mono Green Stompy deck is one of those. But before that, Cedric, let's just have a quick chat about the dominance of a single deck like Temur Rec will necessarily inform people's deck building decisions. Coming into this weekend, whether you're playing at the PT, whether you're just grinding ladder, whatever you're doing, should you be pre-boarding against Temur Reclamation? Is that the solution given its dominance?
Well, if you look at the Temur Reclamation deck lists that are out there, Riley, that's already happening, if you think about it. You've already got people that are playing main deck copies of Mystical Dispute, which part of the reason that card is so good is because, yes, it counters a blue spell on the cheap, but it also is just 3 mana, make them pay 3 more. And so it's a perfectly fine card to play in your main deck. Obviously, it's exquisite in blue mirrors, but a perfectly fine card. Ether Gust, some people that were playing Temur Reclamation up to 4 main deck copies, because green is a very, very good color in this metagame. Jund Sacrifice, Reclamation Mirrors, my green mono green deck too, I guess. And also the Bant and Sultai variants too are all playing green. So, you're seeing people that are pre-sideboarding already in some respects. Now, how far do they want to go? You look at these narrow effects like Ether Gust and Mystical Dispute, and you think that, that's like the most pre-sideboarding you can do, right? Because those are narrow effects that should only be really good in very finite situations. But you would look at a card like Negate. That's really pre-sideboarding. That's how you know people are really trying to beat these kind of decks. And we're going to see people, I think, even move further towards that direction, which Negate is very finite in what it does, but it's effective in those mirror matches. We saw some players like Abe Corrigan already start main deck copies of Nightpack Ambusher to get an edge in the Temur Reclamation mirror. So I think people are going to do this more and more. And I'd keep my eyes, if I were you at home, on what Bant Ramp and Sultai Ramp look like, more so Bant Ramp, and how it constructs its deck to pre-sideboard against Temur Reclamation, because there's going to be a ton of it next weekend.
And we've already seen these decks, as you say, pre-sideboarding a little bit with stuff like Mystical Dispute, Aethergust, but also Wilt. There are actually a lot of tools available for card. And this is not a dead card. You can cycle it away. It's a disenchant that you can cycle, so it's absolutely huge. So I think you should be paying respect to Wilderness Reclamation. I think you should. I don't think you main deck disenchant. But I think if you can find ways to challenge this deck in game one, you're going to have a considerable edge. But let's move on to something here, because this is a question that has really plagued me. This is something I want to set the stage here a little bit. On this show, right? We've talked about aggro a lot. We've talked about aggro that has been having a really rough time of it recently with companions, with everything else, and now post rules change, it's still really suffering. And this doesn't make any sense to me at all. We're in a format where the best deck is a ramp deck that is going big. It doesn't contest the early turns with interaction outside of like a couple of copies of Scorching Dragonfire. And yet Embercleave decks just cannot get a leg up. Corbin, what is going on, and why aren't aggressive decks punishing what has been, considered by some an unlosable matchup against Wilderness Reclamation?
Yeah, I mean, remember Embercleave? That is a heck of a card. But you're right, it has no place in the metagame here. And I think when we look at it, Cedric talked about decks pre-sideboarding a little bit. Well, Aethergust not just is good against Wilderness Reclamation, it hits your red creatures too. So if you're trying to play mono red, you want to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, then you can play your Embercleave. You have a bunch of attacking creatures, and that's your late game. And the thing is, these Wilderness Reclamation decks, despite the fact that they are typically weak to that, they get to their late game so fast that all they need is almost one key piece of disruption, whether that's Scorching Dragonfires in the main deck, whether that's Aethergusts in the main deck, or whether that's simply going Growth Spiral into turn 3 Wilderness Reclamation into untap, be ready to cycle a Shark Typhoon. The deck can just go faster in terms of the red deck. At some point, your Scorch Spitters just don't get there. And what do you do with Temur Rec when you're not having a broken turn? When you're not having a really powerful, huge turn, what do? Well, you play your Uro, or you escape your Uro. And by the way, Uro gains you 3 life. When the deck's sort of B plan is extremely good, and when people are already sideboarding or now main decking a bunch of copies of Aethergust, that is just bad news for Embercleave. So you're right, it seems like it could get in there and it could just swarm this deck to death, but all it takes is basically one key piece of interaction, and then you're just immediately into the late game against Temur Rec, at which point the giant expansion explosions and escaping arrows and everything else just completely shut down any hopes of connecting with Embercleave.
It's really frustrating because on paper you look at these two decks, Maria, and I know that you're an avowed aggro player as well as probably most of us are on this call right now. But Maria, I'm interested in your perspective as well. Your take on this, because we talked a little bit about this before recording the show, and I know that I've been very frustrated trying to play aggro. I know that you've had your challenges as well. Are there any observations? Are there any lessons that we can share with people here about why aggro is still just not performing against a deck that you'd think it should be doing well against?
Well, I think that Temur Reclamation potentially in its sideboard has tools. I mean, it's in the colors that has tools to be able to deal with aggressive decks. But I think the main problem, at least for me, is that say you beat Temur Reclamation with, mono red aggro. Are you going to beat Jund Sacrifice? Oh, no, you are not. That's a horrendous matchup, right? Yeah. So, the top 2 decks here are attacking the game from completely different axes, and you're here in the middle trying to beat one of them. Well, you're going to lose to the other one. What do you do? I don't have the answers. Somebody help.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's really, really rough out there for people who just want to get in there and, and sort of crack some skulls. Cedric, I know that you found a different angle of attack when it comes to aggro. There's been a mono green deck flying around for quite a while. And, yesterday when we were talking about this, mate, I was saying, well, how can you possibly play this deck that has, that's trying to beat other decks that have 4 main deck copies of Aethergust? But you really opened my eyes as to why maybe you can break this down for the viewers here, why mono red is bad, but mono green is actually getting it done. Why is that?
Well, 4 main deck copies of Aether Gust throughout most... Well, 4 main deck copies are 4 throughout their 75. Come at me, bros. I'm ready. I'm not scared with all my forest and green creatures. Not scared at all, because here's the way that I look at it. So, the mono red deck, power level-wise, the cards aren't as powerful as we've seen in other mono red decks of Magic's past. There are obviously some good cards. Annex is good. Runaway Steamkin is good. And of course, Torbrand is good. And we've all mentioned Embercleave and how powerful that card is. But these are all cards that can be contained by this Temur Reclamation deck. And also, once Temur Reclamation starts to snowball, mono red cannot catch up. Because let's say, for example, mono red deals, I'll say 10 points of damage, right? The opponent's at 10 before they've found an Uro or something like that. Traditionally, mono red would be able to stoke the flames or burn you out or something like that, while the Temur Reclamation deck is scrambling to try to kill you as quickly as possible. But they don't play any burn spells. So they have to get it done all through attacking. And this particular build of mono red that people are playing isn't the best attacking deck we've ever seen. You talk about Scorch Spitter. We've seen way better 1-drops mono red in the past. The 2-drops are fine, but Runaway Steamkin is something that Temur Reclamation can handle. And you also have to remember, too, that in combination of Aether Gust, Scorching Dragonfire, Flame Sweep, and if they want to play Storm's Wrath, they can. It's not really hard for them to break apart these energies so that at some point, you're not even actually be able to get Embercleave on the battlefield. Now, the reason I elected to play mono green is pretty simple. The threats are huge and they're sticky, and the Temur Reclamation deck is playing damage-based removal, which you can outpace. Scorching Dragonfire is the key card that they play, so that deals 3 damage. Let's find things that are bigger than 3 toughness. Sounds simple, but if you can poke the hole there, you absolutely do. So if you take a look at the mono green deck that I played, you'll find that a lot of the creatures actually are 4 or more toughness, or they can become 4 or more toughness, and that puts the onus on the Temur Reclamation player to have Scorching Dragonfire right away. Now, it's very easy, Riley, to say, well, what about Aether Gust? How do you feel about that? Well, when I'm a deck that is full of creatures that has no reliance on having more creatures for anything to happen, like an Embercleave, for example, I look at Aether Gust as a Doomblade, straight up, but it's a Doomblade where I have an option. So if you Doomblade my Questing Beast with Aether Gust, I'm going to put it back on top of my deck and not in my graveyard if I want to. And if I don't care about that card because the rest of my hand is full, then I'll put it on the bottom. And having that kind of optionality as an aggro deck is really, really nice. One other card I do want to mention, and Maria, this is going to make you very happy, so I hope you're listening. Rotting Regisaur is really, really good against Temur Reclamation. Yeah. Think about it. Aether Gust, that's going to be a no. Scorching Dragonfire, no. Storm's Wrath, no. Like, all these cards that don't work. And so that's, if you're going to be an aggressive deck, that's how you have to kind of poke holes against this deck. Temur Reclamation, it's a very good deck. It is definitely the best deck in the format, but this isn't Yuri and Jeskai Luka we're talking about here. This is a beatable deck. We know what this deck is doing, Riley, Corbin. We all know what it's doing. Now you have to figure out the best way to poke a hole in it. I mean, Rotting Regisaur, if I'm playing an aggressive deck this weekend, I'm probably going to play mono green because that's what I know. But get that 7-6 out there in Mardu Knights or some black-based deck. That card is a terror for them to beat if it's on turn 3.
Maybe it's time for mono black Obosh to come back.
It could be. It could be. I mean, maybe I'd probably get rid of the Obosh because the mechanic is ruined now. But I don't know. Maybe you play a bunch in your main deck. I don't know. But players are starting to figure it out. What happened this past weekend with this deck dominating both players' tour online events, that was kind of expected. Best people were going to play the deck. When the best people all settle on the consensus deck and no one's really trying to target it, and you're trying to beat in the mirrors, look, this is what's going to happen. But now this coming week, the big question for me is, are people going to say, you know what? I don't think I want to play this mere nonsense. I'm going to find an aggressive deck that can beat this. Rotting Regisaur and Mardu Knights, as an example, great place to start. People are already winning LCQs with it. I would probably start there. You can find ways to beat this deck with aggressive strategies.
Well, let's sort of wrap this little bit up here, but I think because this was really a big learning experience for me, someone who's just been, mindlessly jamming aggro decks without actually kind of thinking about why it's not working. The first thing is that mono red doesn't have reach, right? We talked about that. They can't burn you out from 10, also like that. Second of all, they can actually be picked apart very effectively with key cards. If you're Annex, if you lose your Torbrand, your Embercleave, the rest of the deck kind of falls apart. In contrast to mono green, where if they Aether Gust your 2-drop, your Pelt Collector is still attacking for 4, right? So that's a very important difference. And then it comes back to what Maria was saying as well about the fact that if you're going to gun for one deck, if you're going to try to beat Wilderness Reclamation, you're going to lose to Mayhem Devil. So again, mono green doesn't have that weakness, but it's important, I think, to get an overall picture and not rely on some of the sort of the level 1 heuristics, which is definitely what I've been guilty of, right? I'm like, oh, this deck is cold aggro, I'm going to play an aggro deck. But as Cedric says, you've got to adjust, you've got to make changes, you've got to think about ways to restructure your strategy in order to overcome not just the best deck, but also the other decks that are going for it as well. So I don't know. I certainly learned a lot from having this discussion. You can't just mindlessly jam the same 75 up against Wilderness Reclamation and hope that it's going to work. So
one more quick point too that I just thought of, I want to make really quickly for people that are watching at home. Remember this. As people are preparing for this tournament last weekend and probably this weekend too, think about it. I'm a Temur Rec player. What am I preparing to beat? Number one, the mirror. Number two, sacrifice decks, right? And if I was preparing for last week, and I'd think to myself, okay, well, what do the control decks look like? Some sort of ban strategy. And what do the aggressive decks look like? Almost certainly mono red, okay? So if that's what I'm preparing for, and someone shows up with mono green or something based on Rotting Regisaur, I'm just going to go, I didn't prepare for this. So this coming week, at Players Tour Online 3 and 4, what are people going to prepare for? The mirror, even more now than they probably did before. Sacrifice strategy still. And then if I'm thinking to myself, what's the aggressive deck? Probably still mono red, or I might just go, I don't know, none of them made the top 8. Who cares about aggressive strategies?
who cares? Exactly, yeah.
Exactly, and that's
honestly,
exactly where you want to be.
Yeah,
that's exactly where you want to be as an aggressive strategy in this metagame, I think.
So that's what brings me to this question that I want to throw open to the table here, Maria. We'll start with you. What do you do? What do you do? Like, I'm gonna go back to Mardu Knights. I'm gonna put Rotting Regisaur in it. I might even cut the white and just go to Rakdos Knights, right, and see if I can get it done with that deck. But I want to hear what everyone else is going to be up to this weekend. If you were playing in this PT, Maria, what would you be doing?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be running mono green for sure. I mean, there's parts of me that say, ooh, maybe there is something to running a black deck, mono black deck, but I haven't had time to really think about it. So if I sat down and really thought about that, that might be an option. But mono green, I think, is a little bit more tried and tested. So that's what I would go with, because I'm definitely a beat 'em. I'm not a join 'em.
Cedric, you're in the same boat, I imagine. You run back your trusty gem races.
I would change a couple of cards probably because I wasn't thrilled with my sideboard at all. I was basically a little early on some of the mono green mirror hate. One of my friends convinced me to play, so maybe a little early on the OKM Adversary. I didn't board it a single time.
Oh, before your time, mate. Before your time.
You outgamed yourself, man.
I actually did. Which was a little frustrating. I basically played with the 11 card sideboard, but I would just play that deck again. I would make some minor changes and stuff like that because, again, this is a tournament where I expect people this weekend for Players Tour Online 3 and 4 to actually be focused even more on Temur Rec, less on these strategies, especially mono green. And I'll say this, if people showed up with Storm's Wrath, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. I'd be like, I'm off it. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Don't want to play against you. But every time I got paired against Temur Reclamation 6 times, Riley. And then the first thing I did is look at the sideboard and I'm like, is Storm's Wrath in there? No? Okay, easy mode. And that's what I expect to happen again this weekend. Because they're going to be prepared for the mirror. There's no reason for them to play that card.
Yeah. All right. To close things out, Corbin, if you were playing this weekend, what would you get up to, mate?
Yeah, look, if the format is going to be full of Temur Rec and flying sharks and all of this, I don't know much about sharks, but I live in Oklahoma. We know about tornadoes. And what you have to do when there are a bunch of dangerous things in the skies, you got to get low to the ground. So I'd be coming in with Rakdos Sacrifice. If you look at the deck that Eli Loveman top-aided with, it had some really nice adjustments to it that allowed him to have a shot. He included Fiend Artisan in the deck, which gave him another sacrifice outlet. And Cedric mentioned this earlier, but the Rotting Regisaurs in the sideboard of that deck, that took Eli Loveman all the way to the top 8. You know, he played the deck that is on the radar but isn't the top deck, and he found the board plan against Temur Rec, and he gave the blueprint for how to beat this deck. So if I'm playing this weekend, I'm following in his footsteps, and I'm throwing some cats into the oven, playing Rakdos Sacrifice.
A lot of interesting options for everyone this weekend, and I'm very, very excited to see how things go and whether, Wilderness Reclamation retains its seat at the top of the heap, or, as Maria says, if we're looking to dethrone someone here, hopefully try to shake things up a little bit. The tools are out there. It's up to people to find them. It's up to people to put them good to use, and it's up to the format, I guess, to respond to that and finally come to some kind of conclusion as to whether Wilderness Reclamation can indeed be unseated. But that's that. Those are some of the other decks that have done well, and we perhaps expect to do well heading into this weekend's series of Players Tour Online.
Okay, enough talk about current standard. We are going to think about the future now. Now that Magic Core Set 2021 is fully previewed, we can get hyped up for some of the cards that are going to be released in this set, both just like our personal cards that we really, really love, and cards that we think are going to have an impact on standard in the future. But let's kick things off with cards that we're just really personally excited for, maybe to put in a silly deck, a commander deck, anything at all. And I'll start off here with my personal favorites, which are going to surprise nobody. Rin and Seri, Inseparable, Pack Leader, and Feline Sovereign, because I want a dog and cat deck. Yes, I do. It doesn't need to be tier 1, okay? It can be tier 3, it can be tier 2, maybe even 1.5, you know, maybe that's what I'm hoping for. But I just think it'd be really, really cool to have a tribal dog and cat deck. I love tribal decks, like Vampires was one of my favorite decks of all time, and I think if we can do it with even cuddlier creatures than vampires, it would be so awesome. Oh yeah, and also Massacre Worm. That's not going in that deck, but you know, just generally, I like Massacre Worm.
Oh dear, I think you're probably
Riley,
right.
how about
though.
you?
Well, I just want to say before I give you my cards, I think you're probably right that the dog cat deck will end up tier 1.5 because one of the animals is clearly tier 1 and the other is tier 2. I mean, you know, I agree with 50% of what you're saying.
I hope you're talking about
a
cats,
dog cat
Riley.
Deck. Obviously, cats are the superior animal. Everyone knows it. People who don't say so are the same kind of people who will tell you that Star Wars Episode 5 is the best one because they just want to sound the best when it's clearly Episode 3. Everyone knows this anyway. We don't need to belabor the point. The cards that I can't wait to play with. And look, there are so many good ramp cards in Standard right now. We hardly need any more of them. But I'm very ready to play some bad ramp cards. I'm looking, I know there's Uro and there's Growth Spire and everything, but I just want to get it done with Azusa, with Cultivate. I want to play like mono green ramp going all the way up, of course, to Ugin. I can't wait to play with these cards. And they're like, these might be second stringers when, you know, ramp is the best deck in the format with Growth Spiral or whatever else. But I just want to play Cultivate, man. I just want to play Azusa and then just dump my hand out like that and cast Ugin on like turn 4 or turn 5. I can't wait.
All right, Cedric, how about you?
All right, so as most people know here, I love to give some beatdowns, if that wasn't evident throughout my mono green discussions of the show. Mono white aggro has not been particularly good for a long time, but I'm hopeful. Glorious Anthem is back, better than ever. I top 8 at a Pro Tour with that card in my deck in 2009. That would be cool to do in 2020 or 2021. Who knows? So that's one. Conspicuous Snoop, first of all. What an awesome name. Second of all,
cool.
Yeah, it's a really awesome name, cool artwork, and there's like some weird infinite combo for you modern fans out there. Pioneer, I think it's modern. It's cool. You can look it up on the interwebs. And then last but certainly not least, and this really isn't my type of card, but Sublime Epiphany, because the artwork is so awesome that I'm mostly looking forward to
It's
this card
sublime.
in Cube. Yeah. There it is. I'm also looking forward to having this card in Cube and just looking at it and having that comfy feeling of there's no way I can lose now. And I'm looking forward to that. So those are my 3 favorites.
All right, Corbin, you're up.
Yeah, I've got a couple. Look, what are the best 3 words in all of Magic that you can put on a card? Some people might say draw a card.
Attack with all.
Attack with all. Okay, that's a good one.
That's it. That's it.
Some might argue the best words could be win the game. But the point is that's all wrong. None of those people are correct. The best 3 words in Magic are end the turn. And that is the text on discontinuity. This is a sweet card. Look, I know it's not good. But it says in the turn. You want to attack me? In the turn. You want to draw a card? Oh, your Wilderness Reclamation trigger? In the turn. You want to counterspell my stuff? If I don't get to cast spells, no one gets to cast spells in the turn. Discontinuity is really cool. I also love Sublime Epiphany. You've seen Cryptic Command, you've seen Very Cryptic Command, and I guess this is very, very Cryptic Command, because this card costs 6 mana, and there are 5 modes you can get with this thing. And with Temur Rec mirrors going on, you may actually be able to choose all 5 modes on this card in Standard.
Okay, some excellent choices from everybody here for super fun cards coming out with M21, which we don't always see in a core set. You know, it's really cool to see how powerful this set is in fact turning out to be. And now we're going to talk about Standard, what cards we really think are going to have an impact. And I'll kick it off here, and I'm along the same lines as Cedric. I love an aggressive mono-white strategy, and so I'm going to pick Boss Riquette. brand new Planeswalker, 3 mana for 3 loyalty. This has a lot of potential to be impactful in Standard, and I love the fact that it's employing a token strategy there with its -2, and of course the -6, the ultimate as well. It does everything that I kind of want an aggressive Planeswalker to do, and Cedric mentions Glorious Anthem is in this set. The first time I ever day 2'd a Grand Prix, I was playing with an Anthem effect too, so I have a great love in my heart for cards with Anthem effects. So Boss Ket is my choice. Riley, your choice might be a little controversial.
Yeah, look, I don't know. I can't really back this up. I mean, I know at the best of times I'm a bit of a gibbering idiot when it comes to, this sort of thing, but I really I feel like Grim Tutor is going to make an impact. I can't justify it any further than saying that Demonic Tutor is just disgustingly busted, and the difference between 2 mana and 3 mana maybe makes this card fair and playable. I mean, obviously 4 mana is a lot. We've seen Mastermind's Acquisition. We've seen other 4 mana tutors that just haven't quite got there. But I think 3 mana may be the sweet spot between the busted Demonic Tutor, and the, marginally unplayable Mastermind's Acquisition. I can't back it up any more than it is just a gut feeling, and 3 life is a lot of it's especially if you want to play in a late game control deck, 3 life is a lot to pay. 3 mana is still not nothing, but the fact that we're paying 3 mana for companions and that they're still seeing play, broadly speaking, Grim Tutor is a similar-ish type effect to that. So I don't know. I think Grim Tutor might make it, and if I'm right, I am going to be crying from the rooftops because I just got a feeling. I've just got a feeling, Maria.
We'll give you a mythic if you end up being right for that, Riley, in the prediction section.
I'm going to need it too. Jeez, wait till
All
we
right,
get to
Cedric,
predictions.
we like to play the same kind of deck, so I'm really interested in what you've chosen.
All right, so a couple more, actually. I chose 3 once again. Number 1 is Seasoned Hollowblade, which is just kind of in a Danto Vanguard variant. Some people are comparing it to, and I think justifiably so. Pretty good card, given some beatdowns. I love white-based aggressive strategy, so that's 1. Number 2, Solemn Simulacrum. Riley already talked about ramping, and this one is an oldie but a goodie during the Mirrodin days. And I've always loved this card. It's straightforward. Any deck can really play it because it's colorless mana. And look, it's not overpowered. It's a 4-mana 2/2. Find a basic land. When it dies, draw a card. Simple, straightforward. For my money, it should be in every core set. And then last but certainly not least, Karavek the Spiteful. Because traditionally, when you have these -1/-1 effects like Knight of Soul's Betrayal and Curse of Death's Hold, this one's on a creature. I've got a feeling, not a good one, since I like playing aggressive decks, I might lose to this card a lot, so I think it's going to be pretty impactful.
Yeah, it does seem pretty good. All right, Corbin, what have you got for us?
We haven't even mentioned the Terror of Tron here, but Ugin the Spirit Dragon coming back into Standard. We've got a format full of ramp decks, and now we have one of the best ramp payoffs that's really ever been printed in the past decade or so. So Ugin the Spirit Dragon, 8 mana Planeswalker comes down, can wipe the board if you need it to, sticks around to win the game after that. That card, I think, is just going to be incredible in one of these shells. We'll see what decks end up being able to take use of it, but it's so powerful at 8 mana that you're going to see decks play that. Looking at the top deck, though, I mean, Rewind is getting reprinted too, and Rewind counter a spell and tap your lands. Well, we happen to have a deck that likes to tap and untap its lands and play at instant speed. I can't think of a more perfect deck for Rewind than Temur Rec. So I think you're going to see a lot of that come into play. And turn 2 Growth Spiral, turn 3 Wilderness Reclamation, pass the turn, have Rewind back up. That's going to be the reality you're going to have to be ready for in Standard with this card coming in. So if you're a Temur Rec player, you got to love Rewind. If you're everyone else, maybe you got a shot at Ugin.
All right, well, those are some of our favorite cards coming from M21, both just personally that make our heart happy and that we're looking forward to seeing in Standard. If you've got some, let us know in the comments. But now it's time to check in on some bold predictions.
All right, my friends, it is time for what has up until this week been my favourite part of the show, the bold predictions. We've got a lot to get across, and I tried really hard to condemn this segment to the cutting room floor, but it's not happening. Anyway, before we get across everyone else's, we need to deal with Cedric. Now, Cedric, of course, we weren't able to award you your richly deserved rare ranking for your prediction from 2 weeks ago. You predicted that you would top 8 a Pioneer Super Qualifier with Dimir Inverter, and you did indeed top 8 a Pioneer Super Qualifier. But the reason you don't get a Mythic is because you didn't register an Inverter deck, mate.
Yes. I'm gonna call it a brain fart or a gaffe. I don't know. I ended up winning a Pioneer Super Qualifier with it's been so long, Garuda. So much has changed. You Demon Kraken. That's with the Garuda combo deck in Pioneer, which was great and awesome. And actually, winning that tournament allowed me to qualify for the Players Tour Online 2, where I got, I think it's 27th place. So, you know what? I'll take my Mythic for the person behind, or excuse me, I'll take my Rare for the person behind. Feels like it should be a Mythic, but I'm gonna let it go.
How very gracious of you, my friend. How very gracious of you.
Thank you.
Another rare for Cedric. That's his second as well. Let's have a chat about, I don't know. Corbin, I imagine you're not feeling too hot here after Corey. Last week, he said that Flash would have a big weekend. There would be 3 Flash decks in the top 16 for the first PT event. There was 0. We did see lots of Night Pack ambushes, but that's not going to get you across the line. Anything you want to say to Corey at this point?
There were a lot of cards played instant speed. I gave Corey a rough one the episode before that. So I got to say, Corey and I had a little meeting here. We sat down, we discussed our options. We decided that we're going to rebuild for next season. So you can have it. We're going to let you have it here. The rest of you enjoy. We're looking ahead. Eyes always on the future.
All right. Well, that's definitely my perspective as well. I don't really want to talk about it. I got a common, but I really should have got, I don't know, I should have got a token, a basic land rating for what I got, because I said there were going to be 25% of the top 16 decks across both events we're going to have Embercleave, and exactly 0 copies of Embercleave were in the top. Exactly 0%. Exactly 0%. 0 copies of Embercleave across all top 16 decks in both events. The best finish was 23rd in PT2. So kind of punted this one about as hard as I possibly could have. It was a real stinker from Riley. I'd like to apologise to my friends and family that I've let down with this absolute howler of a prediction. I'm hoping to do a bit better next week, but for a long time on this show, we have called pulling a Bartholdi is making a prediction that then comes uncannily true 2 weeks later. We are going to have to revisit and redefine that term, because Maria this week absolutely nailed it. Maria, last week you said Temur Rec would win both PTs, both of them, and you've done it. You've done it. Unbelievable. A Mythic rating for you. Congratulations, mate. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. I was pretty excited when I locked this in, even before, I think maybe in the quarters or something, I locked it in. Yeah. And a lot of people are like, holy cow, what a prediction. You just windmill slammed that and got it right. But to me, it was pretty obvious going into the tournament that was what was going to happen. Yeah. Thinking about the Red Bull results from the previous week, So, Temur Rec, it dominated much to my chagrin, but I'll take the Mythic ranking to help myself feel a little bit better about it.
Well done. I mean, welcome to the Mythic Club. I picked up a Mythic last week. I'm not trying to move past that. Again, eyes on the future. I'm not trying to bring that up or whatever, but, well done. Well done indeed, Maria, because you really, really did. So now, of course, the ears of the world converge upon our new prophetess. And Maria, what is your bold prediction for this week?
Okay, so no pressure.
No pressure.
Part of me wants, I'm going to be honest with you, part of me wants to run it back. Part of me wants to run it back.
No, you can't run it back. You can't run it back. No.
But I'm not going to do that just for the sake, even though I think I might still be right. But I'm going to make a similar prediction in that the PT will be won both times by a sacrifice deck. So there you go.
Wow. Okay, so PTs 3 and 4, PT Online 3 and 4 will both be. Well, that's it. That is once again a very bold prediction. Let's see if Maria can bring home the bacon two weeks in a row. I mean, she got it right last week. Maybe she's onto something. Maybe she knows something we don't know, my friends. I don't know. It's worth pricking up your ears and listening here. So anyway, we'll move on now to Cedric. Cedric, have you got a bold prediction for us, mate?
All right, so I was going to say something about Mono Green making top 8 this weekend, but I've come to the realization that I do not think many people are going to play the deck. So I'm going to Audible live right now in front of all 3 of you. I believe that 16 copies of Rotting Regisaur will make, between the 2 tournaments, top 8. My number is 16.
16.
So
a
there
full
are 16
4 decks.
top 8 decks.
Yeah. Yeah.
That means like 16 copies throughout those 16 decks total.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
not
either
four,
there'll
four.
be
Okay.
like there'll either be play sets in 4 of them, or they'll be sprinkled around in the sideboards of the main
Yes.
decks. Okay. All right.
Exactly 16.
So exactly 16. Exactly
That's right.
16 Regisaurs in the combined top 8s. All right.
And I want it to be known. I want it to be known that if I get this right, I don't know what's above Mythic, but I want it.
Yeah, you
Masterpiece.
get a masterpiece. Yeah, exactly, a masterpiece.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Corbin, what about you, mate? What have you got for us?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know this, but last weekend, the actual best, there were a lot of cat decks going around, but the actual best cat deck was a Gigantha deck with Rakdos Sacrifice, where someone was playing Gigantha the Wellspring with it. So there were also some
Christopher Larson, I
Yorion
think,
decks
yeah.
still floating around. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say we're going to see a companion return to the top 8.
All right, so there's going to be a companion deck in the top 8 of which event?
Well, I mean, how about this? How about we're going to have a companion deck in one of each of them? I really do think we're going to see Rakdos Sacrifice move up here, and Gigantha had the best win rate of that, so I wouldn't be surprised to see if that becomes one of the norms. So let's go with 2. We're going to have 2 companion decks in the top 8 of the.
All right, so it's
I feel like we all really went out on limbs here, and Corbin just sitting on the ground underneath a shaded
that's it.
tree.
Look,
Yeah,
I
he's-
mean, Cedric audibled me right out of the conversation here. I thought I had
No
something queued up.
way.
I mean, this is not so much a bold prediction. This isn't even an italic prediction, to be honest. This is like a Times New Roman 10-point, Microsoft Word 95 prediction here. But, Corbin, if that's the life you want to live, dude, we are not judging you for it.
Well, you've seen how this season's gone for Corey and I, all right? We just
Yeah,
wanna,
you need a win. No, they do need a win.
Yeah,
They do
we
need a
something.
win.
We
Maybe
need
we'll let them
something.
have
That's
it.
true. That's
All
true.
right.
Got to build
Okay.
some momentum here.
All right, I've thought about this long and hard, and my bold prediction this week. So last week, obviously, I predicted that there were going to be 25% of the top 16s in both events would be Embercleave decks. Obviously, absolute howler. Got that one wrong. I did just say to Maria that you can't run back predictions, but I predict that this weekend, 25% of top 16 decks will be running Embercleave across both events. I got a feeling. I feel like I Bartholdi'd myself last week. I'm gonna stick to my guns. It's the time. I believe in the cleave. I believe in the cleave. It's gonna come back. People are gonna find it. People are gonna put on Rotting Regisaur, and it's gonna get it done. 25% of the top 16 decks, both PT 3 and 4 this weekend, are going to have Embercleave in it. You heard it here first, and then they're also gonna lose to John Sacrifice in the finals. But that's the bold prediction, my friends. That is Maria. I don't know what you think of that, Maria, but that is my bold prediction.
All right, some fabulous bold predictions for everybody. Make sure you come back here next Friday morning for another episode of The Advantage Bar to find out how we did, and listen in as we break down all of the action from the Players Tour events from the past weekend. It's going to be super, super exciting. Will Temur Rec stay on top, or will somebody be able to take it down? We'll break it down on The Advantage Bar for you. Be sure to tune into those Players Tour events, by the way, over on twitch.tv/magic. It's going to be an awesome, awesome set of tournaments once again, no doubt. And subscribe to this channel while you're here anyway. See you back here next week for another episode of The Advantage Bar.